Hi and good day. I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, Presbyterian minister of 3 congregations in Eastern Ontario, and thank you for joining me for this week's Puzzles in Faith. This week's question seems silly in some ways. It certainly is not the most important question you can ask, but it's probably the one question that is most frequently asked. Where did Mrs. Cain come from? So you stop and think. We have Adam and Eve. They get married. They're the first couple God created. They have 2 children, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel and leaves with his wife, gets married. But if there's only Cain, Abel, Adam, and Eve, where did Mrs. Cain come from? So while it's a silly question from one side, one perspective, it's a very important question because it really calls into question the veracity of the Bible. Can we trust the Bible? So that's what we're going to look at today. But the answer, right up front, very simple, we don't know. Okay, so having said the answer, let's explore that question a little bit more. One of the simplest ways to explain it is Adam and Eve may have had daughters as well, but for whatever reason, they aren't named in the Bible. Now, we know this happens a bit later because after the story of Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve have Seth and other sons and daughters. Why aren't they named? Think about that. We're going to come back to that question because that gives us a clue to where Mrs. Cain comes from. Maybe they had other daughters, as I said. She isn't named, so Cain married his sister. Or, if that's too offensive for some of you, Cain married Abel's daughter. You're still left the question of where Mrs. Abel came from, but at least Cain is marrying his niece, not his daughter. That's one theory, and that's the theory that I think many, many people accept. But there's another theory too, that there could have been other human beings around beside Adam and Eve. Now, actually, I had a member in the congregation say she always thought that in Genesis 1, God created human beings. Genesis 2, where they talk about Adam and Eve, God had taken one pair of those human beings, Adam and Eve, and stuck them in the garden. But that meant there were other human beings that God had created who weren't in the garden. And so when Adam and Eve got kicked out, well, there were all these other people there. And so Cain would have married one of their women. I'd never thought of that. I think it's quite, it makes as good sense as much as anything. So I put it out there for you. Could God have created other human beings even after Adam and Eve? Could he have created other human beings to keep them company? And so you would have had other people that Cain could have intermarried with. Absolutely. If you have a more scientific bent and you're talking about, different Cro-Magnon man and Neanderthal and all of these creatures, different types of human beings, there could have been evolutionary humanoids in other parts of the world. And maybe Cain married a humanoid rather than a human being himself. Also possible. The Bible doesn't tell us. Some of you might say, wait a second, we're all descended from Adam and Eve, so therefore, whoa, it doesn't matter. Cain's children and descendants would have been wiped out in the flood. And even if they weren't, and of course that's a whole nother question, the fact that they're descended from Cain means they're still descended from Adam and Eve. We are all supposed to be descended from Adam and Eve. Okay. Remember what I told you to hold on to? That yes, there could have been daughters. And yes, the Bible says sons and daughters. Why doesn't the Bible name them? Why does it name Cain, Abel, and Seth, but none of the other children? Very simple. The Bible is not a historical document. It's not a historical record that chronicles everything from the beginning of time. What it does is it's giving information about God, about where human beings, where we come from, about our relationship with God, and it's highlighting. It's not going to tell the story of, Adam and Eve's third daughter or fifth grandson born to the eighth child, because they sort of go off and do their own thing. God is working through Seth and Seth's line. So the other lines aren't important. And we're going to see, coming through that it's going to be this one gets a different story. That one, they get named and maybe a little bit about them, and that's it. This one, suddenly God's doing something special with them. So the Bible isn't there to chronicle history. It's there to chronicle our relationship with God. And it flags, it sort of takes certain individuals and explores their relationship with God. It'll skip over a few and take others. So Mrs. Cain, wherever she came from, wasn't that important as far as the people who wrote the Bible or the book of Genesis were concerned. Yes, it showed that Cain had a life after his murder, after his killing of his brother. He had a life. He was able to do things, but he was no longer part of that main narrative of the main line from Adam and Eve through Seth to David to Jesus to all of creation. He was no longer part of that main story. And so his story just wanders off and disappears with the flood. So that's the answer for this week's question. And it's not as satisfactory as other things, but it's the best we can do. And the fact is, you can add it to your bucket list and ask God about it when you're dead and gone. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed it and come back next week as we look at the relationship between science and religion, focusing on Genesis 1. So once again, I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, and thank you for joining us for this week's Puzzles and Faith. Take care, God bless, and see you next week.